Shadow Generations is how I chose to intro this video about Sonic X Shadow Generations. Hi, I'm Chris, making this fan. With me is Brody. Make a noise so your thing does something funny.
Hey, my thing's doing something funny.
That was funny.
That was funny so much. And we have Kevin Golden Bolt here, famous Sonic the Hedgehog YouTuber.
I'm the biggest Sonic fan that Nico knows, I believe. Was that me?
He knows me and Chris, but that's...
Who's Nico?
Apparently I was the biggest at one point, even though Chris was in the same Discord server. Anyway, we're talking about Shadow Generations here today on the CRUBCAST on a special episode because I don't know about you, Brody, but we like this game.
Dude, it rocks.
Okay, cool. I figured.
It's so good.
Okay, I was looking at Brody's trophy data last night. I was like, I don't want to talk before we record, but I'm going to get an idea where Brody's at. And I saw that you got to like Rail Canyon, and I was like, oh, Brody doesn't like this game. That's stage number 2.
No, I do. I was just busy on the weekend.
Okay.
That's fair.
A lot of stuff going on. So I actually played like maybe an extra half an hour, 45 minutes before we got on live here. So I'm at like the second round of challenges now.
Okay, so you beat the game.
Okay.
No.
So, Chris, I know you've talked about it in detail over at FTCR to some capacity for like 2 hours, I think I saw.
A plug?
So
For
if you
my
want
Sonic
the
channel?
fuller Sonic nerd version of this, you can go to FTCR.
Yes.
Here on the CRUBCAST, we only have real gamer opinions, and this might be the best Sonic game.
Ever?
I'm not usually one to give a prisoner of the moment take, but
Oh my.
I think it might be.
I'll say, like, having played it,
Or best
it's the
3D,
kind of,
I should say. Sorry.
well, it's the kind of thing where I'm looking at it going like, listen, it's never going to be my favorite because Sonic Adventure 2 will always be my favorite, and Sonic Adventure 1 is typically in the second spot, right? Like, when Sonic Generations came out, I kind of considered that one my second favorite, but Shadow Generations makes Sonic Generations look like dog do.
Hey now.
Yeah, that's like Adventure is one that obviously I have a lot of love for now, mostly thanks to Chris for pushing me onto that in a wholesome way. But it's always hard for me to call it the best because it does have that learning curve to it. It has that 1999, this is the first platformer you've ever played sort of jank to it. A first 3D platformer again. Shadow Generations, it has some of the strongest level design of any of the 3D Sonic games, period. It has even stronger level design once you've beaten the game. That's something that I had said to you, Chris, that I was done with the game. I did everything except for all of the Wings versions of levels.
Yeah.
And then I went back before we recorded and I did the Wings versions of levels. And I don't think I've seen 3D Sonic levels that have been so intimately designed for both playstyles without a hiccup. Like down to like the framing of your jump arcs perfectly matching your little like Black Doom flying arc to higher platforms that you could organically reach via non-flying means in the regular versions of levels. I really, really liked it. I liked it more as time went on, and it did for me what Generations had done for me when I wasn't even someone who played Sonic.
Yeah, I can see that because I remember way back when Generations came out, I came out of that game after platinuming it thinking like, oh, at the highest level of play, that's a really, really good rhythm game. And Shadow Generations feels like it took that and it was able to inject a lot of what I wanted a Sonic game to actually kind of play as, and still able to keep that like at the highest level. It's a rhythm game type of vibe. Obviously, I still have to go through, beat the game, go and do all the S ranks and stuff, and actually get to that level of play. But I can see it there. I can see it in the design, and it's amazing. It's fantastic. To the point that I would be more than happy to see this style of gameplay be the Sonic / Shadow element of a prospective Adventure 3 or whatever you would call it, where there's multiple play styles. I'm happy to see this stick around as Sonic's style of play.
Well, Brody, think of the Frontiers DLC, which already did that.
The thing is I didn't play that, but I heard it was a little janky because the levels weren't built for the characters.
For me, it got to the point that when I went back and started going for the S ranks on the second versions of these stages with the power-ups, I think that all Sonics should be Metroidvanias from here on out, because this is what we expected the logical realization of the open world style that Frontiers had would be if you did a Bowser Fury. We always kind of expected that to be the case, that it would be better by default and that it would work pretty well. And it absolutely does. I think that part's the weaker part of the game, which I didn't expect. I thought that would be the stronger part of this game going into it, just because I thought it would have more Frontiers-y mechanics in the stages, and those didn't translate too well in Frontiers, you know? And then, like I said to Chris, I think Kingdom Valley might be the best 3D Sonic stage. Like that was so enjoyable. The first time around, it reminded me of why all the Sonic 06 truthers exist. Because that stage is immaculate. That stage really is immaculate. And it's even better once you have the extra powers. Like, it's the coolest supersonic type thing that any of the 3D games have had. Because it doesn't just break your speed like a lot of supersonics do, you know? Like, it actually manipulates the gameplay in a meaningful way.
There's at least some semblance still of like having to think about how to use your glide gauge, I guess is what you call it, right? Like, it's an in-air boost, but you have to at least still consider that it runs out pretty quickly and when to use it, instead of just like in some 3D Sonic games, if you're supersonic, you just hold boost and you just go through the stage, like especially in Generations, the Sonic side, you just go through the level and it's like, okay, cool.
And to your point, Brody, I haven't gone back to play regular Generations yet, but from what I remember of it, and I've played it here and there, you know, in the last couple of years, just for fun, how dare I? But those stages, even when they do have more of that, you know, slight linear exploration element, and they have paths that a lot of the 3D Sonic games had struggled to have in the boost era prior to that, this is a whole different level. Again, like this feels like on every level, they were finally able to achieve what they've been trying to achieve, not just with the boost era, but also with like Shadow himself this entire time.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think you'll find the contrast to be stark when you do go back. I decided to because, you know, I'm an SA2 truther at heart. I decided to play Sonic Generations up until the point where you battle Shadow, and then I played Shadow. I started Shadow Generations after that, so I played about 5 stages in Sonic Gens plus a couple of the challenges, and I was just like, ooh, I remember really liking this game. What happened? And I'm like, oh boy. And then I was kind of a little bit worried about Shadow. And then I started Shadow and I'm like, oh my God, they did it. They did it so well. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. Yeah. Now, I have to advocate if you're playing Shadow Generations. I don't know what you guys did. I assume you just left it at default. I chose to play with the legacy controls, which the only functional differences that those make is that the homing attack is XX instead of X square, and boost is on square instead of on R2. And so you double jump and homing attack with X, which some very occasionally can get in the way of what you want to do. But generally speaking, the game is good about pointing the camera where it needs to be, so that the confusion isn't a problem. And I have to, like, it genuinely feels to me like coming home. Like, it feels like I'm coming home after school, popping on SA2 or SA1, and I'm playing like a new version of those games, because it's just the XX homing attack is so integral in my brain that it just feels better than the Frontiers sort of control scheme that the default goes for.
I played too much on Frontiers.
I didn't do that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like that they brought some of the options back. Like, you have the decelerate options in the menu, so you can choose how quickly Shadow slows down when you stop pushing on the controller, on the control stick rather. I didn't touch any of that because I didn't need to. It just felt good. Like, the camera is the only complaint I have with this game, and that's only because you're encouraged to break the game so often that having zero ability to even control the camera at a stop, or, you know, with like, if you move it'd be nice if you could move the right stick left for a few seconds and then the game would realize, oh, we should turn. Like not right away, but like if you were persistent,
Yeah.
But it doesn't really affect much to me. Chris, what are your thoughts? Because like I said, I know you have longer form thoughts about probably the lore implications and stuff, but
yeah.
What do you think in the broader sense?
I would say it's probably the new 3D Sonic game I'll return to the most now when I just want to play a Sonic game for a bit, right? I think every level, even the ones that are really basic and ones that if you put them in Sonic Forces, I wouldn't blink an eye just due to the design of them. I think the game feel here, along with the design of the powers like Chaos Spear and stuff like that, just always has you thinking about how to react every second. And it's very engaging. They give you your bits to breathe now and then where Shadow's just going around on a rail for cinematic purposes or whatever, right? But for the most part, not even minute to minute, the second to second gameplay is just so good feeling and just so, I don't know, they just hit on something magical here where it just feels great pretty much the whole way through. Even the 2D levels, which I was actually kind of dreading a bit going in. Yeah. I think they're really fun. I think they have a really good job of encouraging you to whittle down and find the best paths, and there's a flow you hit with them. I did not have high expectations for this game. I knew it would be good. I figured I'd come in and it'd be totally fine, and it'd be a cool thing. And then I left being like, this might be it's definitely my new favorite since the original Generations, which 13 years ago, I was in high school the last time a 3D Sonic game came out, and I was like, oh, this is really good. So
that was something that I said in our Discord server, which you can join by going to crub.org/join. You can join for free. I had said there, because we were talking about it a little bit, that going back to Generations, as some people have already done in this package, feels like a significant step back. I've heard. I'm expecting that to be a little bit of the case. But the comparison I made in that conversation was it'd be like if they bundled Ocarina of Time mechanically as a game with like a Twilight Princess, except more time has passed between this and Generations than Twilight Princess to Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to Ocarina, having played a more recent Zelda, there is a catch up period where you're like, oh, that's that like this is a little janky, but you accept it. Generations is not nearly as janky, I'm sure, because it was the strongest mechanically Sonic game in the 3D space.
All those boost games, I feel like you gotta hit your head against them for like 20 minutes and then they kind of start to make sense. Like,
that's fair.
The more you play those games, the more you get used to how weird the controls feel. I'd say that's probably the main difference, is that Shadow Generations just immediately feels good to play. Sonic Generations, you get there, but it's not like right off the bat, That's what made Green Hill so useful in Generations, was that it gave you that comfortable space to get used to it, where Shadow, like, they throw you in a familiar level, of course, but they throw you in a familiar level and they just say, go for it. Like, there are collectibles immediately. There are second paths immediately. Like, this is expected to be the thing you play after Generations, unless you're already an expert. Yeah.
And it just hits. Like, I don't want to talk too much about the story because Brody hasn't finished it, but that was the main thing. Yeah. That if we're going to compare it to Sonic Generations, like presentation wise, I think this game just blows every other Sonic Team game out of the water immediately, for one. Some of the cutscenes are incredible, and they're in engine, I think.
You can tell that they learned a lot with Frontiers when it comes to presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the animation's very smooth. The characters, especially the Sonic characters, just don't. I mean, they have been literally mocapped in the past, so there's that. They don't look like weird mascot outfits anymore. Like, it's very natural feeling. It's just such a step up in every front of the animation, the presentation, the way cutscenes are done, the way they're written. Just everything about it. I was like, oh man, I actually care what's going on. It doesn't feel stupid. It doesn't feel like I don't feel like an idiot for still caring about Sonic. I'm playing this and I'm like, oh, this is actually interesting.
It feels like just a teensy bit cringe, but in the exact right way you want it to be.
It's
at some point, like
that's a compliment. That's a whole compliment. I have to be clear.
Like, you can't get away from it. I think once there's a hedgehog looking up at a big warlord alien being like, I'm going to do my own thing. It's a little ingrained at some point.
I think it helps. It helps that it's very vague, because there's not a lot to the story. It's kind of just a character piece. It's just a bit for Shadow to chew on. The rest of it doesn't necessarily do much or matter outside of a couple big moments and Big the Cat being there. And I said to you, Chris, that I think this story or this characterization of Shadow, again, it felt like what they wanted to do with him from the start. And it felt like the exclamation point on the last several years of Sonic finding his way back into like gamer cultural respect, because even the good Sonic games always have that bit of
they have something.
There's something, or it gets a little bit less of a critical darling score because it's more of an arcade experience, and arcade experiences require you to replay them, and reviewers don't have time for that. Therefore, you're reviewing a game you're supposed to play a dozen times once, and that whole thing that Sega games have always struggled with.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this is the highest rated 3D Sonic game, I think, ever. I think Adventure is kind of weird because I think Adventure would have been rated higher if you found all the score aggregates, probably. But a lot of them just don't exist.
It's the highest in a long time. I know people were making a big deal about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's not, and even then, it's not like it's a 90 on Metacritic or OpenCritic. It's still like, what, 80 something. Like that's just 90 where
in my heart, baby.
That's where Sonic will probably always be. It's always going to have that little knock against it. And that's a shame. But for this to have just come out and it seems to have hit everybody's feels in the right way. It's hit everybody's, control feels in the right way. Mm-hmm. It feels like for the first time since I've been a Sonic fan that definitively there's no question they've found their footing, because every time they seemed to find it before, the next game tended to have a struggle to it.
They try to do something either completely different or they don't iterate enough. It's one or the other almost.
Yeah. And like after Generations, we had Lost World, and then
which is like bad for what it is, but
no,
it's
you're wrong.
We're not allowing that propaganda here. You can't convince people to play Lost World.
Hey, you like Concord? I can like Lost World.
Concord's good.
If we were in a world where Lost World was unplayable now and Concord still existed, the world would be a better place.
Yeah,
frankly,
that's the crazy thing about Sonic, though. Like there were spin-offs and phone games and stuff, but the games are good. Good up to Generations. Lost World came out. 4 entire years passed. Kids entered and left high school. And then Sonic Forces came out. Not good. And then 5 years passed where more kids entered and left high school.
Sonic Boom.
Turns 10 soon.
Sonic Boom came out before Frontiers. God. Thank you.
That was before.
I meant to
Sonic
say Forces,
Boom, Fire and Ice on 3DS.
Yeah, you're goddamn right. But yeah, no, like there was a point that I said to you, Chris. Again, I've said a lot of things to you specifically, because Brody's actually not real. He just doesn't exist.
It's true.
He's a figment of all your imaginations. We talked about this at one point.
Canada's not real. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, damn right, it's not. At one point, when Frontiers was about to come out, and the movie had succeeded, everything was going well. Mm-hmm. I said to you that Sonic Roblox game was going to be the game that introduced more kids to Sonic than any other game. And first of all, I'm still correct.
It wasn't bad.
I'm still right. That's still going to happen. And it's just interesting that they because they went from there being a Sonic team developed or co-developed Sonic game essentially every single year except for I believe 2000. From the entire era of post Jam essentially. Until I think 2015, there was something. And then 2015 onward, they slowed down. I mean, Boom was different, but 2015 onward, they slowed down, and it didn't seem to help fully. And it seemed like they were still struggling. And again, it's almost miraculous to see it come full circle so quickly after Frontiers. Because Frontiers has problems. Like I think it's a really cool, promising game that you have to just go in knowing this is Unreal Engine, hire this man, the video game. And I liked it for that. It was exactly the right kind of dumb thing that just, clicked in my brain. And for them to immediately follow that by taking the one big critique that one of the many critiques, but one of the biggest critiques people had, which were the stage mechanics, and going back to Generations and perfecting a game that, was pretty close to perfect once you got to know it.
Mhm.
It's just incredible. And yeah,
I think if Frontiers had levels like this in it instead of just reusing like the best of and then a few weird specific built for the game gimmick levels, I think people would have a much different view of that game. I think they'd still think all the downer mystery plot and overworld stuff that would still be there, but if there were like good ass Sonic stages in there, I think that would have been a different story for that game.
Well, I think it's really funny that we have now a game of Shadow going through like some of his best of stages of like, visually recreating them, but they're effectively like, they're kind of, they're reusing elements, but they are new things. And then having Forces be the ones where it's like, oh no, we actually like recreated Radical Highway, but it doesn't look like Radical Highway. It looks like Green Hill Zone, whatever it was. Right?
Yeah. Just you wait.
I mean, I don't know. It was just really funny that they decided to like use the Generations assets to remake like SA2 stages in that game. Not that I was complaining, because I really like the Sonic stages in front.
No, yeah, I know what you meant, Chris.
I spaced out and thought you meant Shadow Generations, and I was like, just you wait, Brody. But yeah,
but speaking of Radical Highway, we talked about this in the server as well. The Radical Highway Doctor Strange interlude sections that happen in a lot of these levels where Black Doom does his thing, I was worried those would be more intrusive on repeat playthroughs than they are. And they kind of all just mesh into those levels really well. Like they don't take away, they don't hurt anything. They don't necessarily add to every level, but
I really like them because I remember I saw the leaks and I remember seeing that there was no Radical Highway stage. And I was like, oh, that's disappointing. And then going into that first level, having that happen, I was like, oh, okay, this is a really cool way to only have, as many stages as this game has, but still get more of that representation in there. So I really like that.
Yeah, move. Given their shorter time frame on this, again, they did a remarkable job, and I don't have many things to say other than that it's really, really, really good. And I think Shadow's cool. I think he's cringe, but I think he's cool now. I never thought Shadow would be cool to me, but like. Like they did it. They took the dumb Shadow the Hedgehog storyline from the game Shadow the Hedgehog, and thankfully didn't put any Shadow stages in the game. But they put the bad guy in, and that was the representation of that game. Like they took even the darkest moments of Sonic as a franchise in the general zeitgeist opinion, and they made it. They redeemed all of it in a way.
2 decades later, the 06 level is the best level in the game. Black Doom is a better villain than what's going on in the Sonic side of this game, right?
It's one of the better, not to spoil anything for you, Brody, we won't talk about it in detail. One of the better final bosses that I can think of in a 3D Sonic game. Probably the number one in my, actually, like maybe Chaos, but I didn't like Chaos too much because it was a little too janky.
From the one boss I've fought so far, it's very promising.
Yeah. I can't think of a better final boss in the 3D games.
All the bosses are kind of cool. Like even the ones that drag a little bit are kind of cool. Like there are a few. Like there's one that I'm like not a huge fan of, and there are parts of it's the second one.
Brody, do you know names?
Oh, Metal Sonic,
Metal Sonic
Overboard.
I'm so hyped for that one.
It's okay. I think it just goes a little long unless you know the exact perfect path, which you're supposed to learn, but. I think it takes too long to get there the first time, Fair enough. But it's also a good way of teaching you those mechanics, which we didn't talk about a lot of the Black Doom power-ups, but all of them are really cool. Even the one that comes near the end that's kind of a lot jankier than the rest. Once you understand what they're trying to do with it, it's okay. I don't love it, but I said at one point, they took all of the jank that Sonic games tend to have by default, that Sonic games must have some level of jank. Mm-hmm. They took that and pushed it all into one mechanic and then said, there, it's all there. The rest of the game is freaking sick.
They contained the demon for once. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad that the game explains it to such a point where so few people seem to understood it that I was going around with like some graphics someone on Twitter made and just pasting it in servers and being like, here's what you actually do. And so many people responded to it. Or like, oh, I get it now. It's fun now. And I was like, literally just like a 3-step panel of here's how to control Doom Morph. Got people like, oh, okay.
I thought that because I read it and then I was like, I think I had put the controller down when I got to that power up. So I read it, I put the controller down, I came back, I read it again. and I'm like, still, what the hell they want you to do?
Yeah.
And then once because I was doing one of the little overworld puzzle sections in that specific area that for some reason is the only place that has them, where there's like random pop-up puzzles. Like there are other sequences and things and cool platforming elements, but there's that upper mountain area.
Oh, the Chaos Island callback, because Frontiers has to have you spawn in the challenges, right?
Exactly. And there was one of them that requires specifically that the Chaos, whatever you called it.
The Doom Morph. Great name.
It was with that, and I was just struggling with that for like probably 5 minutes straight up, because it's like you go really high up there, and I was like, okay, I can get to the one, and then like the homing is just a little bit too tight in terms of like the window that it gives you to homing attack it, and
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that it's just a little funky, and it didn't matter in the grand scheme, but that should be fixed with like a better tutorial pop up in a patch, ideally, and they should probably add a map system for the bolts. I found them all without
all. I like them. I like my hidden collectibles.
No, but they should add one post game, because when you are at 79 out of 80, you're not going to like them as much. Especially with this game's draw distance still being a lot better than Frontiers, but not quite being there yet.
Frontiers had such a good map. I don't know how they went from having such a good one you can zoom in and move to just you zoom in, zoom out, and you can't even move the map around. Like I don't know what got lost between these two games and that. Maybe that's another jank containment area where they're like, oh God, we have to sacrifice something to Satan, make a bad map. It's like, okay, the rest of it can be really good then.
That's perfect. I actually found, I think I found everything without a guide. There was one that I went to look for a guide for the last bolt, and then while going through the first like 10 of the ones in that YouTube guide I was following word for word, I found one completely unrelated, and I was like, oh, it's over there, cool, and I got it. So like I did technically use a guide for that, but I like 100% of this game without any assistance. It was just easy and good easy. You know, it was painless mostly.
Yeah, it felt good. There were like a couple in-level collectibles that I was having trouble placing. Like there's one in the penultimate stage, like the last zone, the first act. There's at the start of the stage, a completely different path that you're just not even thinking about, because the opening of the level is just a reference to the original level, right? So you're just like, okay, yeah, I just go through this stage I know by the back of my hand, and I just go through. But then like 10 tries in, I was like, where the hell is the first one? So I stopped at the opening part, looked to the right, whole swath of level out that way that connects back into the main level. I had no idea. I just didn't even look.
There are so many really cool hidden ones, like especially like the last couple levels of the game. There are so many ones like in free falling sections where if you free fall the right way, you start like you'll just see it while you're falling because you die a lot, and you're like, oh, I got to start the level over, and then you just notice it, and you're like, you tricky bastards. The only other thing I want to highlight is that in the same way that they made Shadow cool to me, finally. Again, he's still cringe, but he's like Vegeta cringe now. It finally clicked. Chaos Control as a mechanic is such a like, I don't know how they will not go back to having this in a future game unless there's a Shadow, character. But it's one of those where I don't know that I want any Sonic game to not have that.
I love
because the ability to just, A, you can charge it just by defeating enemies. B, you can choose when to use it at your leisure and actually stop the timer, along with there being, hidden little wispy rails that you can just only do when time's frozen. It
is like subtly the coolest mechanic in the game, I think. Like it's understated for how much you use it. But
like they couldn't have looked at Astrobot, but like it is that, and I love it. But like there's been a trend of like Crash 4 Astrobot, this game, of being like, what if we just put a time stop mechanic in our platformer? And I'm down for it. Keep doing it. Just keep doing it, man.
It's there are a couple things I don't love about it. Like when you use the Chaos Spears during Chaos Control, they don't actually move until but only sometimes they don't move.
You have to like literally walk up next to the thing you want to hit and do it, and then it'll, like, if you're thinking of like Space Colony Arc, you have to go up to those tubes and then hit it, and it just works while time stopped. but otherwise you just see it freeze before it and you're like, okay, that's cool, but
like like there were a couple times where I'm like, oh, this is a learning experience in a way. It's not necessarily a bad thing or a huge critique, but there were some where I'm like, well, I used chaos control and I have to wait for the door to open.
Yeah.
But I can't stop chaos control.
There's one in the 2D Kingdom Valley I explicitly remember where the ceiling above you is blocked from like moving pillars, and like every single person I've seen gets stuck right there. And like, I guess I got to stand here for 3 seconds. Cool.
Yep. Like just a couple things like that, and like disabling chaos control, like just by pressing the button again, or even holding it. Because I don't think that pressing it's the right idea, because you could accidentally press it. Yeah. Similarly with the Doom Wings, they did the same thing that they always do with Supersonic, where you can't turn it off once you enable it. Yeah. And it would be cool if you could do that. I'm guessing they don't want you to accidentally mess it up and undo it, because it does take 4 seconds to start for some reason. But yeah, the tiniest of critiques in what would be probably the best platformer of the year, if not for Astrobot having come out and being a tour de force in its own right.
Yeah. Like it says a lot to me that I'm Mr. like deep, super in the weeds Sonic fan guy, right? I just sit here and it's literally just what you said are like my only complaints. Like everything else is just so good that I can't really complain at all. It's just
I can only think of like
it's good.
How, when I think about it, I just think of how I can sing its praises, like how I like that they made the levels longer on average, right? Like that they're like actually like 5 minutes give or take instead of 2 seconds. Like 90
the first
seconds.
time that super long 3D boost Sonic levels didn't feel like a nuisance at times.
Yeah, and like I want to go play them, and I want to play them to the best of my ability and get that rhythm experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is strange because you said that the overworld part was the weaker element of it. And while I do agree that it is weaker, I think it's still really good.
It's still good. Like I really enjoyed messing around. I like the bolts being there as like a little secondary collectible.
Like Unity indie game collectibles.
Yeah, that was
scattered around.
That was the Sega don't hire this man. I was going to say something else about it. The thing I was going to say, and this is my probably final thought of it, is it was good enough that I want to make a video about it.
Whoa.
I don't know that I'm going to.
Damn.
And it's not even about the gameplay. It's about the thing I told you, Chris, with the story. Mainly because I have a good title for it and a good thumbnail that is really funny. But yeah, I just like the fact that I want to talk about this in like an actual analysis sense. Like for those that watched my Sonic Team video and my Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 videos, the reason that I made it into a Sonic Team video was after talking with Chris a bunch, because I played through Heroes, I played through Shadow, and obviously I had played through SI2 already. For doing a video on Heroes and Shadow specifically, I had nothing good to say, or I didn't have enough good to say. And I didn't want to just punch down on games that people like, because if I only have critiques, then what's the point? You know,
people and the same punching people have been doing for decades. At
exactly.
This point. Yeah.
Like it doesn't lift things up at the end of the day. It doesn't make people feel good. Like I don't need to add that into the world. So when I thought about the thing that you had said to me, Chris, which was just the whole Takashi Iizuka lost 20 pounds crunching on Heroes, that was what got me to turn that into like a documentary. And I'm probably most proud of that video of any of the videos I've made. And the fact that we're going from that to me looking at this this culmination of what Shadow has been to the series, a character that I didn't really care for. Like he was cool in SA2, and that was really it for me.
He's my favorite.
And even then, he was just kind of Vegeta, you know. Like, but they took that and they paid all of it off, and they made me want to gush about it and him, you know.
I've been gushing over Shadow for 20 years.
It's got to feel good for Iizuka, because that is his character. It's his baby. I think he's consistently said it's his favorite character, right? So to see it go from like the franchise's favorite child to representative of everything people made fun of the series for, now back to today where it's like people are like, oh man, I think Shadow's cooler than Sonic. This is better than the previous best Sonic game, Generations, depending on what people think, right? He's got to be feeling pretty okay, you know, this past week.
I hope
it's like
so.
Universal acclaim for this.
Like genuinely, I hope so, because if nothing else, he was always once we started working on that video, he was always the symbol of people wanting to make Sonic good. Not that there are people that wanted to make it bad, but there were other powers within Sega that were always getting in the way of it. Was Yuji Naka, and there was always something getting in the way, whether it was needing to release new games to keep the company alive or anything like that. But throughout it, it was just this guy wanted to move to America to make cool games. He wanted to make games with his friends. Like, he wanted to make cool, badass things with guns. Like, he followed trends, but he did it. And that's not all him, but he's the figurehead.
Yeah.
But they did it in their own way, and it didn't work. And so then for it to come full circle, at first as an ironic figurehead, and then as a genuine, like, thing here, for lack of a better term, again, it's just I'm happy for that.
Sonic and Shadow are back, baby. Keanu Reeves is Shadow now. The world's different.
They didn't even change much. They didn't really add much to the story. It's literally like 3 cutscenes, and it worked.
Barely
That's
anything
the impressive
happens
part.
in this game.
Yeah.
So it's so great. I will say, I think it's a free DLC, and I recommend downloading it or just watching it on YouTube. But I think there's like a special end credit scene if you get it in the game.
On PlayStation specifically.
Yeah, the whole Dark Beginnings animation, like, I'd already watched it in like piecemeal on YouTube in the months prior, but right before I started it, I watched that as if it was the intro cutscene to the game, and the way that it sets it up, it just sets you up for like, oh, this is going to be hype. This is going to be what I want it to be, and it totally works.
That's the right thing to do with that. I think all those animations should just be in the games going forward. I don't know. I'm guessing it's a licensing thing and a time thing why they're not. But hopefully this is the catch to fix that going forward.
Yeah, it was weird that it was a DLC. I had to like instruct a friend because he couldn't find it.
You have to download 20 gigabytes of video files.
Maybe that's why. I guess that's probably why it's a DLC.
So it's okay.
That's fair.
Well, Crubbers, is that it?
Yeah.
I wanted to say one more thing on the game, if that's okay.
It's not, but I will let you.
Well, it's a tinfoil hat. It's a little tinfoil hat theory that I've been cooking up, which is with regards to Frontiers and the DLC adding in the extra characters with regards to Sonic Dreams or Dream Team or whatever it was called. I never got the chance to play that one, but I'm insanely jealous of the people that get to, because I've heard that one's really good, and it has like 3 different types of playable characters in it. And now with Shadow kind of hitting that, like, oh, this is what I would want to see as Sonic gameplay going forward, and the overworld being like, okay, I love this overworld design, but can you put it in an environment that isn't just a blank white space? Could you make like it aesthetically a little more interesting?
No.
I feel like those 3 things are culminating in my mind to where it's happening. We're getting Sonic Adventure 3. The Chow Garden interview, we're getting Sonic Adventure 3. It's not Cope anymore. It's happening. I don't
think they'll ever want to call a game Sonic Adventure 3 because of you can't please everybody.
Well, after they remake Sonic Adventure 2 with all these assets they now have.
Don't do that.
We're getting Sonic Adventure. I know it. And it's going to be awesome. At least the Sonic and Shadow stages will be it.
It's going to be 5 years, and it's going to be a Knuckles Chaotix game. The thing that I will say to close us off is I think we can all say, all of us agree, buy this game if you enjoy Sonic gameplay. It's worth the price of admission for the Shadow stuff alone, and you get Generations with a little bit of added jank for now until they probably patch that stuff. Mm-hmm. It's really, really good. Big the Cat was in Soliana at one point, and he was on the Ark. So therefore, I think Big the Cat is responsible for every major Sonic game's plot behind the scenes. And I think in Sonic Adventure 3, if it comes out like Brody wants, he should be not the villain, but like Palpatine in the background.
I saw the character. It was like, oh, here's the 6 characters or whatever, and you only know 2 of them so far. It's Omega and whoever comes out from the second stage. And I'm like, okay, well, 2 of them are obviously Gerald and Maria. And I'm thinking the other 2, I'm like, well, one of them's got to be Rouge. But then when I unlocked Big, I was like, oh, they put Big here because he's one of the ones that they didn't use in Sonic Gens, and Rouge is already in Sonic Gens, which means she's not coming to this game.
You'll have to see. Yeah, Generations hit during the We're Ashamed of Big the Cat era, which was a black stain on the series, frankly.
True. You ruined my outro, Brody. Goodbye.
That's okay. I say it's okay.